So what Stonewall want is for changing your legal sex, your gender, because they conflate the two, whereas actually I think there's an argument for saying they are very separate things. Stonewall say that how you identify should determine what toilets you use, what prison you might end up going to if you're convicted of a crime, what hospital ward you go to. They believe this should all be a matter of self-identification. Which obviously has an impact on women's rights because, when you have 1 in 5 women have been sexually assaulted at some point, it's quite important to have space away from men. That's not prudishness, that's just safety. And that's what Stonewall are pushing to get rid of.
So what do you say
and when it
critics
comes to...
Sorry, Jo, what do you say to critics, though, who will say that argument is promoting the idea that trans people are inherently dangerous or predatory?
Oh, not at all. It's saying that men are inherently dangerous and predatory. And that's obviously not a popular thing to say, but it's the truth when you look at crime statistics. And that doesn't change just because you call yourself Shirley, change your pronouns, or put on a pair of frilly pants. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. Biological sex is biological sex. And whether the violent behaviour of men is nature or whether it's nurture, it doesn't change when somebody decides to identify as the opposite sex. And that's the problem.
But you would concede that it is a minority of men who engage in that kind of behaviour. But I suppose what you're saying is in terms of safeguarding, you concentrate on what the minority would do, not how the majority would behave. Is that the point?
Yeah, I mean that's why single-sex services exist. They exist because a minority of men pose a problem, and that's not to be disparaging about men. That's just a statistical fact. Men, 98% of sexual violence is committed by men.
In terms of Stonewall, how have we reached the point then that effectively the taxpayer is paying for a lobbying group? And how is it possible that we've reached the point where a lobbying group can have this much power over public policy?
Yeah, I mean it's quite startling. So I think it's been about just huge, the money that's poured into Stonewall, and a lot of it's been through the Diversity Champion Scheme, which essentially is a scheme that allows Stonewall to vet an organisation's internal policies to see that they are sort of inclusive in the way that Stonewall categorise inclusivity, and that has then. They also score companies for things like whether they have LGBT networks. And of course, that's not actually about supporting their staff or their employees who identify or who are lesbian, gay and bisexual. It's actually about this very narrow ideology. And that, we've seen it, obviously what's happened to Professor Stock recently, that can have really serious ramifications. So there's a barrister called Akua Reindorf. She investigated what was happening at the University of Essex, and she found that Stonewall had been misrepresenting the law, and that they were having a chilling effect on freedom, academic freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So they are, you have a CEO at Stonewall who says that people who hold the perfectly ordinary belief, gender-critical beliefs, so that is that there are two sexes, that you cannot change sex, and that sex matters. Those are gender-critical beliefs. So I would argue that 99% of people would not see a problem with those those beliefs. Nancy Kelly, the CEO of Stonewall, has compared those beliefs to anti-Semitism. So when you have such a kind of a really extreme ideology, and when you have them vetting the policies of organisations, of statutory bodies, of they claim to have over 900 members of the Diversity Champion Scheme, and when you have organisations having their policies vetted by this really extreme ideological organisation, it's no surprise that we're seeing an impact on freedom of speech.
So this genuinely worries me insofar as, surely, transphobia does exist in that there are people who do hate other people because of the way they dress, the way they look, this kind of thing. And is it not possible to stand up against that kind of behaviour and to stand up for equality for all but at the same time stand up for the idea of women's only spaces or the acknowledgement that biological sex is a reality. Why are those things considered to be incompatible? Why is it being framed in this way?
Well, I think Stonewall have suddenly found themselves on the back foot, and they've been very used to everything going in their way on their way for quite a long time. So they are now basically accusing the media of transphobia and saying there's a campaign against them. Whereas in reality, I think people are asking very valid questions that should have been asked right from the start. So I think sort of challenging the idea that, for example, a man who identifies as a woman should be allowed into women's changing rooms. I think it's fair enough to challenge that. I don't think that's transphobic. I think that's just logical, and that's not cruel. That's not unfair. That's just an opinion. And I think Stonewall have suppressed the debate and have had it all their way for such a long time that even the slightest challenge, they're now, I mean, they've blocked me on social media. I'm never objectionable. They block anyone who disagrees with them on social media. And I think in a way, they've almost got a sort of a mindset of social media in the way that they operate. They block those they disagree with. They're very polarized in the way that they present arguments. And I think they're, in a way, their approach is very much influenced by that sort of with us or against us, social media fueled anxiety almost.
Do you see a time when there will be a possibility to sit down with representatives of Stonewall, with gender-critical feminists, everyone get around a table and sort of sort this out? Because at the moment, it just doesn't look that way to me.
No, I don't think there will be. I think, to be honest, it doesn't matter what people think, so long as we don't change legislation to enshrine something that is essentially an ideology. So with, for example, the current consultation that's open on banning conversion therapy, that's something that Stonewall have been pushing for a long time. Now, of course, you'd have to be a bloody monster to think that conversion therapy was in any way either effective or a good idea. It is clearly not. But when it comes to gender identity, if you ban questioning why somebody feels uncomfortable in their body, you could effectively criminalize people, criminalize decent therapists doing their best to help people on the basis of an ideology. And that is really concerning. And yet the government, rather than having a 12-week consultation period, as is normal, have truncated it to 6. And that is blatantly because of Stonewall. And that's clearly an attempt to have a good news story in time for next year's LGBT Free to Be Meat conference, which the UK are backing, which the UK government are backing. So I think yes, we can absolutely have conversations. That would be great. But at the moment, we're fighting to stop something which is essentially a belief system from being enshrined in legislation.